me welcome you to our first lecture on the elements and principles. And in this lecture, we'll be covering shape, line, and contrast. These are some of the most fundamental building blocks of the art vocabulary. We'll look at all different ways that they are utilized in examples. So please enjoy, and thank you.
So we talked about a formal analysis at the end of last lecture, elements and principles of art. And today we'll be covering a couple of the elements, line and shape, and we'll be covering contrast for the principles. Line and shape elements, principles, contrast. This is Hakusai, the Great Wave off the shore of Kanagawa. It's a woodblock print from Japan, the 1800s. So this one is a masterpiece of design and narrative storytelling that we will look at again and again throughout the semester. And if you can see, he has a great use of shape. He has this shape coming here. He has these repeating shapes over here. This one is not necessarily realistic, but it does depict an objective representation of water. We have beautiful line work in the claws of the wave cresting. We have beautiful line work in these, the waves, the water. They look like solid shapes and colors stacked on top of each other. He has contour lines that define the ocean, the mountain, and the ships. So as we can see, Hakusai uses all kinds of different lines in his piece here. Now let's move on to Jackson Pollock. So Jackson Pollock, abstract expressionist painter from the 1950s. He is non-objective, so his paintings don't resemble any kind of object in the real world. They're paint on a canvas, and he's emphasizing the gestural quality of his stroke. So he is expressively using line and dripping it around in circles to create almost what looks like a chaotic mess in a way. So it's a gestural, very energetic and organic line. This Mel Bochner, Vertigo, this is another kind of line. It's also abstract like Jackson Pollock, non-objective, not resembling any object in reality, but mostly just line and color and shape. His line is almost as if it's mechanical, it's geometric. It's like a machine that's gone haywire, perhaps, writing over and over the same sequence. Then we take Leonardo da Vinci, who has soft implied lines here. He uses gradients to describe the form, and that has a very realistic effect when you have these soft edges, soft edge on the cheek. That's the way that you can create realism. And this one is not an abstraction, but a portrait of a person. Okay, and then here in terms of sculpture, we have Mark the Subaru, who makes a lot of sculptures out of I-beams, steel I-beams. And these are also non-objective, non-representational. They're just forms, orange forms. And again, sort of like the Mel Bochner, he has all kinds of geometric lines and some circular lines too, going in all different directions. So here's some different types of line. We have contour line, implied line, and we have different functions of line. The function of line is to direct the viewer's gaze or to communicate an idea emotionally. Different feelings or ideas can be expressed by line. Lines can regulate control. Lines can express freedom and passion. Lines can be regular or irregular. Lines are used as shorthand for describing the edges of 3D objects on a 2D surface. Remember, lines are an abstraction and rarely exist in nature. So in nature, we have gradient. In nature, we have colors that transition softly or smoothly from one to another. And we rarely have real lines. They're an abstraction or a concept we can use to describe form on a 2D surface. So between actual lines and implied lines, actual lines are actual lines that don't have any break in them. Zigzags, squiggles, all these different kinds of lines. Implied lines are lines that your eye will connect. They're not actual lines, but the connection of different points together making a line. Okay. Here's the telephone poles drawing our eye in the distance. Those are implied lines. Here's an example of some more implied lines. They are mental rather than physical. So we have the implied lines, maybe the snake drawing us around in circles. There's a motion to this that draws us in sort of a chaotic circle. Implied lines are compositional elements, not actual marks, that lead the viewer's eye along a particular smooth path. Can you guess the main implied line here? What do you think the implied line is here? Go ahead and take a guess. If you guessed that, you're right. Okay, so we have this implied line going through God into Adam's hand and then down out the lake. Can you guess the implied line here? What do you think it is? If you guessed that, you are right. So the implied line follows the people. People are a lot of times the most interesting thing in the picture and can use them to create an implied line. Here's flow or visual vortex, similar to this piece. This one here has the hands, the arms, the limbs moving us up in a visual vortex. This is by Bologna. It's called The Rape of the Sabine Women, made in 1583. It's a sculpture, depicting a Roman mythological event, and it's in Florence. The Cheviot Cave drawings are some of the oldest works of art ever discovered. They're 7 times older than Stonehenge, 30,000 years before Christ. So this is a gestural line made out of charcoal. Some of them are made out of bone ash, and they are all over these caves. There's tons of animals that are depicted, and we will cover these later on in the semester as well. There's some more. Keith Haring referenced cave drawings and their use of line with his chalk drawings in the New York subway system in the 1980s. Here's some of his drawings. They have the thin, thick lines, squiggly lines. They have a very whimsical energy. So line weight can be a big way to convey energy, or continuous change in width or thickness can vary to show energy. Movement suggests depth or position and carries connotations of each. Okay, so this could be like a thick line weight and a thin line weight. This one is a sort of a oscillating line weight. It goes back and forth. Length, a long line may be tall or strong or far, whereas a little line may be short and cute, close. Then the texture of the line. So how smooth or rough can carry connotations. Change by using different mediums or line quality, soft, grainy, brittle, sort of a silky line here, depending on what the paper is that you're using, perhaps. Vertical lines a lot of times convey strength, stability, and authority, like here on a temple. Horizontal lines can communicate calm and peace and passiveness, like the boat on the horizon. And diagonal lines are action and drama. So a person moving forward, there's a motion, there's an energy to a line going across a square canvas. So curved lines bend, gradually change direction. They have an organicness. It feels like the human body sometimes. They suggest comfort and casual. Zigzags, they can be restlessness or anxiety, frustration, vibrant or high energy. They're bouncing our eyes around constantly. And then there's a style, continuous, dotted, dashed, implied, can lead our eye in a direction if you want it to go. Interrupted lines make good for patterns, energy and calling attention. They're like a road taking us in the distance. These are the Nazca lines. So they were in Peru, 500 BCE to 500 CE. So this is during a time when the Western world had not come to South America yet. And it's a mystery. We don't know exactly how these lines were created. We know that they were scraped out of the ground to reveal this gypsum. There's spiders, there's monkeys, there's birds. They're all contour lines or they're outlines. So the contour line is the outer edge or the outline is the outer edge, and the contour line is any line to describe the form. So this would be the contour lines, or this is a whole drawing made out of contour lines by Henry Matisse. So there's no shading on it, there's no gradation, so that it takes us away from realism. Instead, just tells us about form through line. So our outline is this very outer edge, but the contour line is every line on the inside and the outside that describes. This is a continuous contour line by Egon Schiele, and it's a remarkable example of a drawing that he's doing where he's never breaking his line. He's never taking his hand off. He's just continually drawing the line and over very precisely. Egon Schiele was a master draftsman. He was from the early 1900s, drew mostly figures, people. So continuous contour line will be one of your sketchbook assignments this week. These are some example drawings from students that I've had in the past, and these are made from just continually drawing. You never pick up your pencil. So you can see how the line connects here, because you're not allowed to pick up your pencil in this exercise. You just keep moving the line, tracing the shape that you draw. So there'll be an explanation for that in the sketchbook assignment for this week, and you'll get a chance to do some continuous contour drawings. Sour Kids, The Devil Made Me Do It. This is a graphic design piece, and it's a great example of just all different kinds of lines you can use. It's just a barrage of lines. You have dotted lines here, you have dashed lines, you have organic curvy lines, you have different line weights, all kinds of different lines. So this is a Carolyn Davidson, the Nike company logo from 1971. It's a simple statement, suggests rapid movement and speed. Okay, so there's a diagonal line. Like we said, diagonal lines create a lot of energy and speed, motion off the page, right? There's this feeling that it's flowing forward. Now just imagine if you put it like this. Now, how does it feel? How does the orientation alter it? I'll let you answer that question for yourself. Here's the way that it's done. How does it feel when you look at it that way? Okay, and then here's Van Gogh, the bedroom. So he uses a lot of lines to create a sense of disarray or unrest in his painting. This is his bedroom. He has a sense of anxiety that he's trying to make these short, choppy lines, fast lines. He wanted to paint fast. He wanted to paint quick, try to keep his brush moving with the speed of his mind. They're going in various directions. Some lines are pronounced. They're kind of carved into the canvas a little bit. You can see the brush strokes. He was quoted in his letters as saying he wanted to convey the vile qualities of human existence. So try to make that room not look so clean, but kind of dirty and sort of disheveled. And then here in the Starry Night, of course, we have the line work again, short and choppy and kind of carved in, but more swirling, organic. Get this flow. The lines really direct our eyes, and there's a lot of motion in this picture. Also, this horizontal here, or this vertical here, horizontals here. Andre Masson, he did automatic drawing. So he was a surrealist, and the surrealists believed in tapping into the subconscious, trying to see the erratic, chaotic, wild, unrestrained parts of the mind, and tap into dreams. What's going on behind our everyday thoughts. And so he would do these with his eyes closed. He would draw these things with his eyes closed, and they would come out kind of wild, kind of strange. And then transitioning here to shape, we have Joseph Albers, and he did Homage to Square in 1963. This is a line enclosing shape. So Joseph would use line to create these different colored shapes, and then have us see how our eyes would interact when the different colors are stacked. He did all kinds of color experiments on canvas with stacking different colored shapes on top of each other, and even wrote a book about the interactions of color. Pete Mondrian, He is a French artist who did believe that art should be, he painted more representational stuff, trees and landscapes earlier in his life, but then eventually believed that art should just be the three primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and then black and white. So, and just geometric shapes and compositions. So he's using line and shape geometrically and very simply to try to reduce art to its most basic and simple form. George O'Keeffe uses organic lines and shapes, color to emphasize these. There's flowers. Sometimes they've been described as vaginal, and George O'Keeffe herself rejected that interpretation. She's oftentimes seen as a feminist artist, but didn't necessarily want to embrace those titles. So, but masterful work of line, organic line, and shape. Let's talk about a definition of shape. Shape is a flat enclosed area. Shapes are created by enclosing an area within a continuous line here, like Joseph Albers, surrounding an area with other shapes. So you can put stacked shapes on top of each other, like George O'Keeffe, to create shapes. Filling an area with a solid color or texture here. So putting like Mondrian, using a solid red to create the shape. And then also a gradient, almost as in the Leonardo da Vinci. Remember the cheek, create that soft gradient, and that will describe a realistic volume. Shapes can imply an area, just like lines can. So we have, this is the AT&T logo by Saul Bass. And this one was used to, you want to talk about global connectedness. AT&T is a phone company, internet provider, so they want to create a simple, powerful globe and give us this sense of interconnectedness while also implying the shape. That was made in 1984. Do you think it works? Shape. Sometimes three-dimensional masses are referred to as shapes, especially if they are not geometric. Most of the shapes in this painting by Kandinsky are geometric shapes. See there? So geometric shapes are straight angles. They're based off math. They have lines. They have degrees. There's precision to them. They're used in architecture, machines, building. And then this is also by Kandinsky, another painting. Most of the shapes in this painting are considered organic. So we can see in contrast, the right angles, geometric shapes, the organic shapes are the ones that just have flowing edges, curvy lines. There's gradients, all kinds of different shapes, but they're all very free-flowing, referencing the human body more, organic things, plants, water, anything that has more of a fluid motion. So there you go. What's the difference? This is an important thing to know. A geometric versus an organic shape. What's the difference? And make sure you know that. Here's some examples of geometric shapes. Crisp, precise edges, mathematically consistent curves dominate the world of industry and architecture. Here's organic shapes, natural world of plants, animals, sea, and sky. A 3D enclosure is called a volume. So circles, squares are shapes, where spheres and cones are volumes. So this would be a shape, and this is a volume. This is a flat shape to a polyhedron. The volumes don't exist in 2D, but they exist as illusions in 2D. By using gradation or shading, you can make a 2D shape appear to be three-dimensional, right? So that's also in humans. If you want to create a realistic human, you have to shade the face so that it becomes volumetric. One of the interesting things that Gustav Klimt did in the early 1900s in Vienna is that he would intersplice volumetric shapes, these shapes that have shading, with flat shapes. You see that? There's the flat shapes and patterned lines connected to, look at the hands, how they're shaded to create more of a realism. So we have a flat and volumetric intersplicing. Here we are again, the portrait of Anna Bach-Bauer that was stolen by the Nazis and later recovered by her family, who then sold it to a museum in New York. Okay, remember implied line? There's also implied shape. What would be the implied shape of this? What do you think? What kind of shape is being made by that? If you guessed that, you're right. Basically, two pyramids. And we have each one of these, the Sale, this group of people, and then this group of people here. Here's Norman Rockwell, famous illustrator from the 1950s. What kind of shape would this one be implying? What do you think? This is a lineman, an electrician working on a telephone pole. If you guessed this, you are right. Implied shapes give order and structure to otherwise complicated images. So it created a triangle. Figure-ground relationship. So the figure is the foreground of the object, meaning in this one, the oranges or the apples, whatever you interpret them to be, would be the ground, and the background is the space between objects or the background. So the white here is the background. Figure is the object, white is the background. White doesn't have to be white. In this one, the sky would be the background, the man and the telephone pole, or the figure, the foreground. A positive shape is the figure, and the negative shape is usually the surrounding area. Depending on placement, a figure can be dynamic, static, leaden, or buoyant. So here is one that is static, dynamic, or buoyant. This one is sinking, so leaden. Okay, so this is a drawing exercise that we do in drawing as well, and it's where you draw the negative. So instead of actually drawing the figure, you just draw the shape of the figure, and then you color in the background to push the figure forward through the negative. So we call that figure ground reversal. When it's well designed, everything becomes supercharged. So here, Peter and the Wolf by Phoebe Morris. This is a Russian play about a boy who captures a wolf that's killing ducks, and Peter and the Wolf. So as you can see, we have the wolf here. We can focus on that as the figure, but then we have our figure ground reversal where the background becomes the foreground as we notice the shape of the boy's head. This is famously used in M.C. Escher when he plays with the concepts of positive and negative space. His artwork can be disoriented. So we have the duck that slowly transitions into the background and the white duck that slowly transitions into the background. So there's this patterned repetition, a lot of line, organic geometric shape. It's symmetrical. And we have these two different figure ground reversals changing. Artist Pablo Picasso also plays with this idea. Is this two people kissing, or is it a portrait of one person? Or is this a mouth kissing another mouth from profile, or is this just one face? Yes, you're right. It's both of them at the same time. Shepard Fairey, he is famous for taking this is Andre the Giant's face, and very simple, just using the lines to create a figure ground. So he, defining the nose and the mouth and the cheeks by just outlining it. And he takes these iconic posters and he'll paste them all over the streets. Obey. So it's this ominous face telling you to obey, almost like a 1984 type of reference. Shepard Fairey is also known for creating the Obama poster, Hope. So there's a video to watch on him this week. Here's another MC Escher figure ground reversal. Finally, in this lecture, let's talk about contrast. Contrast is the difference in elements. So line, shape, or color. A thick line, a thin line, an organic shape, a geometric shape. Contrast is when the elements somehow will be opposition to each other to give variety. Contrast is also the relative difference between lightness and darkness in an image or object. So images with low contrast have values that are similar to one another, and images with high contrast have values that are very different from one another. So we'll talk about that more when we talk about value. Here we have contrast in shape variety and size diminution. So we have smaller shapes that are telling us things are further back, contrasted with bigger shapes that are closer to us. See how these ones get smaller? We have these organic shapes of the men contrasted with the geometric shapes of the machines and the factory that they're working in. Here's a high contrast picture where we have the deepest darks and the brightest whites. So the contrast is created by the relative lightness and darkness of the image. We also have these geometric lines here, and then in here we have organic lines. So anything that's more darker shade, it seems to be an organic shape. This is a low contrast picture where the values is very light and all the values are sort of close together. We also have a contrast between this being a busy area and this being an empty area. So shadows and highlights are much closer. What would that be? What kind of contrast is in there? High or low contrast? Well, this one would be a high contrast because of the darkest dark and the lightest light. This one has a full range of values. That means an image contains the darkest darks and the brightest brights and a multitude of steps in between. We'll talk more about that when we get to value. Kara Walker uses these shapes, heavy contrast shapes of white and black, so a very stark contrast. And Kara Walker does these depictions of African-American life during the antebellum South, so the slave period, and they're grotesque figures performing all kinds of horrible actions, or there's one's vomiting. There's people that are being murdered or tortured. A lot of times there's references to swamps or things that you'll find in the South. There's plantations. Here's another, this is a character defecating on another character, and it looks like this person is holding this character who's being stabbed in the neck. There's an arm that has been decapitated, and yes, they're very grotesque. All right, finally, let's do an analysis of Carrie Mae Weems' picture here. This is from 1990, the Kitchen Table series from 89 to 90. So talking about line, shape, and contrast. As far as line goes, we have lines that trace out here, lines that draw our eyes using the table to here, this line from here going to here. We have these vertical lines drawing us to the little girl. We have these curvy lines drawing us here. So everything's kind of taking us into this center of interest as far as line goes also. As when in shape, we have this shape here, we have this shape here, we have this big shape carved out here. So a lot of rectangular geometric shapes, the geometric shape of the table, the geometric shape of the door, the geometric shape of the circular mirror. We have this horizontal here. So there's some geometrics, and then we have organic shapes. So the girl is an organic shape. The mother is an organic shape. So we have these organic shapes and geometric shapes contrasting in this small room. This is more of a curvy organic shape as well. And then as far as contrast goes, this is not a super heavy contrasted piece. It has some contrast, and the contrast is placed in the most important areas, which is her hair is much darker than the rest of the piece, her dress, the hair of the little girl. So the heaviest contrast is where our eyes will look. So we're being drawn right into this narrative here. We have the mother, the little girl, kind of mimicking what the mother's doing. Carrie Mae Weems a lot of times has themes of cultural identity, relationships of everyday life, normal routines, domestic interiors, in dialogue with conversations about those topics. All right, so thanks for watching this video.